The next session is on world literature on getting published. I'm honored to introduce the speakers. Chhimmi Tendef-la. Half Tibetan, half English, Chhimmi Tendef-la has lived in Sri Lanka on and off for 30 years. Educated at Eton and Durham, he runs an international school in Colombo, teaches economics and provides university counseling. He has written plays and fiction for local publications. He is a fresh and promising new voice on the literary landscape. Mathew, an aspiring writer in the field of film and art, who retired early to pursue writing in art and making a film, one that would leave a mark on Indian cinema. I invite you to start the session.
Okay, hello. So, thank you for coming. I'm glad you all found a seat, but because there's so few people here, it might be a bit obvious if you leave halfway through, so we'll try and keep you entertained. I've written 3 books published by HarperCollins, Pan Macmillan and Hachette within India. So I was just thinking if anyone was interested in being published, whether I could give some tips of how I myself got published.
So myself, I am Karnan, coming from a village near the Wonderla amusement park in Kochi. I have been writing for the past 6 years, especially in English, poetry in English.
Right. Okay. Okay. So that's very interesting. I know a little bit about. I don't write poetry. I think Mathew does a little bit, but I can tell you some of what I know on the basis of being published here. I'm afraid I've got some slightly bad news. I think poetry it's quite hard to get published in, just because I'm not actually 100% sure why. But Mathew, do you know why it's?
I'm not a specialist in poetry. The other day I conducted a session with 2 different poets talking about the content of poetry, talking about love poems, what connects poets together. But I think today, if you're a young man your age, I would publish your poetry first online. There are so many platforms offering publication possibilities online. And I would say, don't think of in terms of Indian publishers, British publishers, American publishers. The world is open. If anybody tells you these are the publishing houses, that's nonsense, because the world is open to you today. So go in and look for that kind of a subject on the internet. You will find many, and you will find forums where poets come together, join in with them, get responses, feel encouraged, keep your optimism, discover. You're so young, you don't know if you're going to be a novelist or a poet or a toddy tapper or auto rickshaw driver in your life. You have to be open to all these possibilities. When I was 12, my father wanted me to be a policeman, to be a sub-inspector. I never got anywhere near it. Became a filmmaker, which I never expected also. Studied in the best film schools in the world and traveled all over the world and became a kind of director of a Swiss feature films program. So you never know where life is going to take you. So be open to that and begin to do what you believe in.
I would like to add a point to that. I did my MA in English language and literature from the MG University Kotak.
Yes.
So I have been writing since the age of 18 until now.
Yes.
Now I am 23.5 years old. And I found it quite strange that people from India, especially my parents who are in their 50s, early 50s, they find it quite strange that I've been writing in English, which is a foreign language, according to the vernacular.
Yes.
In the vernacular terms.
Yes.
But they are not into promoting young talents like us.
Well, one of the troubles with open world is it's a commercial world. It is the private economy that drives the world economy. There may be funding from some governments for your kind of projects. You have to look into that. I don't know about government funding for poetry students. But the question is, are you passionate about it? And if you're passionate about it, I believe you will get somewhere. By the way, an MA in literature from India does not make you an English-speaking person or an English-blooded person. I have a friend from Kerala who lives in Switzerland who was an MA in literature. He can't write 2 sentences together. He can't write an invitation letter, so that doesn't say anything. That is one side of the story. I am a person who studied Malayalam till the 7th standard, then went on to English. And the last 40 years I haven't spoken English because I live in a German-speaking area. And I live in Switzerland, which doesn't even speak German. It speaks a Swiss dialect of German. But I published my first novel in German. And it is how much passion you put into it, how careful your language is, how crafted, how powerful, especially with poetry.
The scenario that exists here is such that when I try to write poems in English with universal themes, the people around us, especially the elders, the teachers and parents, are not much that encouraging, and that often makes me think like I have been born on the wrong part of the planet because of the lack of the English-speaking community around me. Because language needs to be communicated on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. If I may answer that also, I think as a poet, your family is other poets. Not your born family is a different family. I notice no, don't think about your state and your family. You have a poet's family, and that poet family has to find you. You have to struggle for it. You have to struggle for it. There is no easy way, you know.
I think at the end of this session, we'll have more questions and answers. I'll just speak generally. I mean, in case anyone else here is trying to get published, just the way I went about things was that it was always a hobby of mine to write. I used to just write nonsense to my friends all the time, and on the feedback of that, you feel like you know how to write, but until you get started, you don't really know what you're doing. So what I did was. So you write as much as you can, and then you find when you send it to someone, they may say the technique's wrong, and you're not really sure what you're doing, which is fine, and you have to take that criticism on board and learn from it. The good thing now is I'm now 43. When I started writing, I would have been much younger, and I didn't take it very seriously. But now that there's all these online forums, as Mathew was saying, for example, there's a site called You Write On in England, where you send in, you load up your between 2,000 and 6,000 words, and you have to review other people. And when you do, you get credits. And with those credits, people have to review you, and they give you ratings and feedback. And based on the ratings, if you end the month in the top 5, then a publisher has a look at it and also gives you feedback. It's a very good exercise for 2 reasons. One is that exposure to a publisher. But secondly, you are getting very good feedback. You're also getting very bad feedback. So some people really know what they're saying, some people may not, but it teaches you to take on criticism either way. If you are published and you're very successful, even the most successful authors in the world will get some negative reviews. And rather than letting that get you down and destroy you and hurt you and make you want to give up or make you want to kill them, you've got to take it on view. I mean, if someone says they don't like my book, they don't like my book. You know, I can't argue that they should like it, because it could be a personal choice that it may not be. So it's a good exercise in that matter. Then it also teaches you how much to take on board, whether you take on the criticism so heavily that you change everything, or you change a little bit, or you stand strong with what you've written. So anyway, that's the first thing I did. The other options, and this is a very good option, but it costs money, is there's things called literary consultants, where you send something to. In England, there's places called the Literary Consultancy. There's places called Cornerstones, where you send your manuscript and you have to pay depending on how many words you've written. It sounds like a lot of money, but if you think about the education you would have paid for, say you're becoming an accountant or a lawyer, whatever, you go to university and you spend a fortune. This is I would see that as my right. I'm an economist by degree, but my writing education was through things like this. So I invested my own money in a few reports, and they get back to you, and they're always quite positive, and they make sure they pick out the good things, but they will tell you where the technique's wrong, or where your strengths are, and maybe what's most marketable about what you're writing. Because if you're very keen to get published, the publishers more often than not have to make sure that you're going to make them a bit of money, or at least not lose them money. So they, to get an idea of where you might be marketable or not, it's quite handy. So from there onwards, then I decided to send my books to India, and so I just Googled. I Googled an agent online. My agent is a guy called Kanishka Gupta, who I think back when I found him had quite a few clients, but now he has hundreds. From there, he also will give you feedback saying, okay, either the different answers he might give you is either I'm not interested, I am interested, but you have to make changes, or he's interested straight away. So for example, with my first book, he said, okay, he really likes it, but it's too short, and work with my editors and expand it, which was good. So I'm just going to run through the process. And then when you get from there, you then, if you're lucky enough to get an agent, and the thing is, with these things, for every one book they take on, they may reject 100 books, because it's just the nature of the beast. From there, they then pitch it to publishers, and there's no guarantee that the publishers will take it on. But at least you've gone through an agent, and they know which publishers to target, and they help you improve your work to fit the publisher. The tricky thing is, I'm assuming most of you here are trying to write, trying to get published. The tricky thing to know, for example, is what audience do you pitch for? Because my books are based in Sri Lanka. Do I write the book for just a Sri Lankan audience, or do I try and write for an international audience? And if I write for an international audience, do you have to sort of hold the reader's hand and say, this is what's happening, this is what a egg hopper is, this is what whatever the dish is? Or do you just write the story and hope that people will be interested enough to look it up? And I think the second approach is better. You write the story you want to write, and you hope that it appeals to a larger audience. There's other routes as well. I mean, I haven't done it myself, but there are self-publishing routes. I'm a bit wary of how successful you can be by self-publishing. In terms of finance, you can make possibly more money self-publishing if you market well, because you get a bigger cut. But I don't write for the money. I mean, I'm writing because I enjoy it, and for me, I like working with a publisher because they improve your work as you go along. I was discussing with Mathew earlier that when you at least initially you should think of writing as something you enjoy and you're passionate about. And that's certainly what I do. It's very difficult to make a living out of it. If I wrote a list of the things I've bought with the money I've made from publishing for my books, it would probably be just this watch. So there's not a huge amount of money, because you get, I'll just break it down, because these are all little things that you may not know, but for example, out of a book you may get 8% of the royalties. From that, your agent may take 15%, you pay tax. So for say a 400 rupee book, I'll get about 20 rupees, for example. So it's more sort of something you do because you love to do it, but you look at a large audience. So I'm now published in South Asia, and you hope to sort of get, the publisher then tries to sell it in other countries, and if that happens, then it expands. But initially, at the beginning, it's nice just to get an audience and to write what you want to. Sorry.
Okay. Chi here has written two books. One is being written now, within a span of 5 years, 6 years. I have written one book in 20 years. And it's still not published. It's just getting published. But I have publishers asking for my book. That's a different story. I did not write a book to get it published, to get money out of it. That was not my passion. My passion is I wanted to write. I'm bursting with emotions. I'm bursting with thoughts. That compels me to write. What happens afterwards, that's another story. Once I've completed my book, I look at what can be done with it. That is one way of looking at it. The other is having contacts, having a literary agent, having somebody to push you and promote you, and you go along. I think especially when you're writing poetry, You write poetry because you're moved by something. Something is hurting you, or something is passionate, and you're convinced about it. Don't think about what will happen to that poem. Send it out into the world, and then forget that poem. And don't think that you're going to make money out of that poem. Don't write for that, especially as a poet. Then, as you grow older, you will find your way. If you believe in yourself, you will find your way. You will improve your language, you will improve your diction, you will improve a lot of things. You will work on yourself, and then the poems will change automatically. I think one can also find a balanced way and say, this passion of mine, especially poetry or sculpture, will not earn me much money, so I will be a normal teacher or a taxi driver or whatever in my daily profession. I have a filmmaker who was an accountant for 20 years almost before he made his first film. But then his film was such a powerful film, he got so many offers. The same thing happens with a book. You don't have to write 20 books in your life. If you write one book and it's a world-class literature, then you can die in peace because you've said what you wanted to say. So it's a question of what you want to achieve it. If you want to earn money, you probably go into short story writing and then try to sell your short stories and remain in a small world. And you might go up with that. It's very similar to sports. You can say, I want to be in the Olympics, but you have to go through a process of competing, working on yourself, working on your technique, on your muscle, and you reach, and then you reach. The higher you go, the higher the hurdles. Everywhere you find hurdles. But don't write to reach, become famous that way. Write because you're passionate about it. And then other people will listen to you. That is the only way, I think. Because once you can write, I don't know, whatever, a short story, a poem, an article, and it's compelling, people will come looking for it. And you can be proud of it anyway.
Yeah, and then actually, just going on, I agree about sort of aiming for the Olympics. The good thing about writing, though, I feel is, I would have loved to play international sports, but, you get to a point where, you get to about 25 and you think, I'm not going to make it, like I'm not nearly good enough. But as writing, you're just going to get better. Like you can get better and better with age and experience. So, there's no physical aspect where, until you start going senile or something, but that's much later. You're just going to get better, and it's all experience, and it's all learning, and it's all moving forward. And what I genuinely feel is every single word you write is part of your education. Not your education, sorry, my education also, every word I write. A lot of it I scrap, but it's a learning process. I feel like I get better as I go along. It's also knowing kind of what audience you write. Each of my books are quite different, so I'm still not sort of sure what writer I am, whether it's sort of comedy or hardcore stuff, but it's a development as you go along. You find out what moves you and what makes you tick.
In novels especially, it helps you to first of all, before beginning a writing even, you have an idea. Today the internet is there, and there are so many coaches, there are so many do's and don'ts and all that. And first of all, to ask yourself, what am I going to write about? Is it going to be a funny book? Is it going to be a tragic story? Is it going to be a historical novel? Is it going to be a psychological story? Is it going to be a criminal story with a murderer and a very brutal crime? This kind of categorization helps you to start your story. But these are the things that you learn on the internet, through attending writers' workshops. But every time you develop your sensitivity, and even if I chose the Olympics, the gold medal in the Olympics is not the limit. The limit is the sky, because every runner who has won a gold medal wants to improve his own time. That may not happen in athletics, but in writing, I haven't heard of a writer who goes from bad to worse. Most of the authors who work on their stuff, they improve, they learn from their mistakes, they grow, and they grow as a person, and that reflects in their writing. And the more and then you have a message which is universal. If you're writing for a little audience or recognition from your family, then you write for that circle, and that limits you. If, for example, the temple of Ayodhya is torn down and it upsets you, and then realize It is not the temple of Ayodhya that is being torn down. It is the concept of being together, of humanity that is being torn down. And if you can articulate that in a story, put characters, make that story believable, because that's something that you believe in, then it will come through. And to make my story short, once you have something like that, approach a publisher or a literary agent. And if you don't know a literary agent, in one of those seminars, in one of these workshops, you will find a literary agent. Go to a festival where literary agents take part and show them your work, talk to them. And then, you have to be convincing. You have to say, I am all fire and blood and all this. This is my poem. And do read it. And give him a few lines that he can feel, aha, I get goosebumps reading it. I want to promote this boy or this young man. That's it. I have met the nicest people on earth, not because of any special gift of mine. Maybe I talk well, but people believed in me from the very first instant of meeting me. They believed every word I said. So scholarships came running after me. I'd never went after scholarships. So I got all the scholarships I desired in the world.
Okay, and just the sort of nuts and bolts about getting published. If you do approach a literary agent, you have to write a cover letter. So there's sort of standard things you have to do. And if you don't follow the format they ask for, they'll just bin it straight away. But if you follow the right format, in that cover letter, you have to sort of stand out. Assuming what Mathew said, you weren't lucky enough to meet a literary agent at a festival, you need to stand out in the letter. And to stand out, you need to have a sort of good hook for whatever you're writing, but you also need to have a good hook for yourself. So it could be your MA in English, but often something like saying, I've written a short story for this magazine, which was published, things like that. So you aim at different things. So even if you're writing a novel, you should be doing other things maybe on the side and trying to get a short story published here or entered in a competition where you win a prize, and then obviously that stands out. It's the same as, I work in a school also, so I handle university applications. And I always think of, we get students into Harvard and things like that. So you think about Harvard, they've got millions of applications and they need to find a way of getting rid of some of them. So they'll find any way to bin them, just to say, it's human nature, just to save their own time. It's the same with the literary agent. They get so much that, half of them will get deleted without even looking at it. So you need to be able to stand out and ideally say sort of, I've done this or I've done that, and and then certainly for me, for example, after my first book, the next two were much easier to sell because you already made a name for yourself, and then you've had a few reviews and things like that. So from my background is I wrote my first two novels. I wrote both of them before I sent one to a literary agent. So I had so that's why they came out very quickly together. So I had both of them, and then the next time, actually, my next book was a collection of short stories. And the truth behind that is I started a couple of the short stories as novels and found, I finished saying what I wanted to say after a certain point, and I didn't want to waste time fleshing it out and boring the reader. So, but even to sell a collection of short stories is quite difficult unless you've already been published as a novelist. So it's a difficult thing to get into, but there's no reason why you can't. As we said, you can just keep getting better and better and keep trying.
I think the idea of short story, especially for a novelist, is a very valid format, because what you can do is you have a main theme, let us say partition of India or the conflict between Muslims and Christians and Hindus, whatever, or an arranged marriage, whatever it is. If it's, let's say it's an arranged marriage, your theme, but it's also the man-woman relationship. That's a universally understood subject. You can write 10 short stories or 20 short stories, all with that same theme in different contexts, different times, and they are connected with the same idea. So you are actually working on a short story with a novel in mind, and you can add to it, and each time one short story is there, you can publish it, you can show it submit it to a competition and get a feedback, and that takes you on. And at one point you suddenly realize, okay, I've got 20 short stories, that makes it a big novel, and now because you've thought about it right from the beginning, that becomes a novel, and then you can submit it. And submitting is not so difficult a job because people are looking for good material. To tell you, good publishing houses, they get 100 manuscripts and they take maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3. And then a person like Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, got first denied by 33 publishers till she found a 34th one. So it's an uphill task. And that's why if you feel disheartened with the first no, then you're going nowhere. You have to lose many times in order to win later. Some people are lucky and they have a first throw of dice and it gets them attention, but that's not the normal way. It happens to some people, but to most people it's a hard climb. But as I said, write if you have to write, if you feel compelled to write, and once you have a good story, a good poem, a good short story, try to reach a literary agent. Small publishing houses don't need a literary agent. You can go and give it to them directly or send it to them by post. But interesting publishing houses, large publishing houses, they need an agent. They will look for an agent. If you submit it, it can remain unread for ages, and then one day you get a letter, not fit for our program. There is a synonym for that, like NP. We say not in our program. So, that's a pseudonym for your work is boring. We don't need it. Thing like that. Yeah.
Yes. The other thing about a literary agent is it's not just about finding you one publisher. They may find you sort of 5 or 6 if you're lucky, and definitely, as Mathew was saying, publishers get back to you in about a week or 2 weeks rather than 6 months. But also with me, because it's never been about money. You can't base it on money that this publisher is offering more than the other one. But you find out from them, they write to you and say why they would like to work on your book. So you have sort of 4 different publishers saying why they would like to work on it, and you can judge for yourself which one is going to be the best to work with and going to get the best out of you. So I remember the publisher I took for my last book, my agent said, be careful because they're really going to push you. They really make you work hard. And I said, that's exactly what I want, because you can use that expertise to try and make your book better. So that's the benefit of a literary agent, and everyone's always concerned that they take a cut of your money, but it's not a huge amount of money anyway, firstly, and secondly, anyway, they probably get you more money than you would have got on your own. So it's definitely worth doing. In terms of even as Mathew was saying about getting rejected, I guess it's, even if you went out, if you were trying to get married and this room was filled with 100 women, I'm sure they wouldn't all say yes. I'm not saying anything personally is wrong with you, but it's a personal choice. So same with the authors, even if publishers, even if someone says no, that's just a personal choice. It may not be their taste, but someone else might love it. So you can't get disheartened. I guess if you've been turned down forever for 5 years or something, then it's maybe you need to work on your book and make it more marketable or more appealing. But a publisher will look at things, and Mathew will know, will be able to add to this, but a publisher may look at, that you've got strong characters, convincing characters, realistic, also original, that you're avoiding cliches, so not sort of using words and phrases which are often used, that you have plotted properly. There are actual techniques for plotting, whether you don't have to use those, but it's sometimes easier if it's the first time you've done it. Marketability for sure. All these things add up to the publisher, but very often, very often something will just appeal to a certain publisher and he'll really want to work on it. He or she will really want to work on that, and that's where you can go from there. I was going to say that if anyone else, even though we said questions later, if you have any questions along the way, please do ask, because you may have specific areas of writing you want to ask about.
To an agent or to a publishing house, because anything you write, you keep going back to it, and there are ways it can be improved. So when do you know it's ready? Yeah,
and that's a very good question. We met for the first time today, and I was telling Mathew how I'm very impatient. So even when I finish something, even though I know it's not ready, sometimes I just try my luck. I want to say, now it's different because I'm being asked for things. I'm working with people as I write. But before I used to sort of think, I'm not really ready, but let's just try and let's hope, because I'm naturally impatient. that's why some of these places, as I said, it costs money, unfortunately, but some of these feedback places you can write to would maybe give you some tips. And these consultancies I talk about, sometimes they like your work, but they see it needs more work. They will say to you, look, if you do this, 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 and this, send it back to us, and if we then like it, we'll send it on for you to a literary agent. Similarly, with the feedback online, you may get sort of out of 6 people, you'll see online, if you go to these forums, you'll see the really good writers, and maybe you'll take their word more than someone else. And the good thing is it's anonymous. It's kind of anonymous in terms of it's not you asking your mother who has to say it's good, or I wouldn't ask my friend, because if they say it's bad, then I might tell them that they put on weight or something. It's revenge. But it's just Mathew was telling me earlier that he had a neighbor who was very honest with him and would say that chapter really moved me, or it didn't move me, and then he'd go back to work on it. So it's a very difficult question. But the thing is, my view sometimes, and it could be wrong, is before I had an agent, because there are so many people you can send it to, I sort of took the thing that if I didn't get an agent, I would then rework it and try again. I got lucky the first time, but it doesn't always happen, obviously.
I would suggest to you, first of all, I think writing a novel, writing a story is like a spider catching a fly and then deciding, oh, I have to build a net around me. So before you write a story, you probably know your story yourself. And you think about how does it begin, how does it develop, what conflict it is, because stories have to do with characters and conflicts, and how does this conflict get resolved. And you have an ending in your mind. Then you write this, and you write this, and you write this, and then first thing to do is, when you have finished your story, give it to a couple of friends who are honest. Find friends who are honest. All the others are bullshit. So tell them, what do you like about this, what you don't like about it? I want to know what you don't like about it even more. So they give you that kind of feedback, and then you think about it yourself and you say, well, I'm happy with what I've written, I don't want to change it. Once that is ready, then be prepared to have a 1-page, or even maybe some publishers want a 3-page summary of your synopsis. Then some publishers want to know you, because it's a name. Renuka is sending me something. Who's Renuka? So tell them who you are. Tell them in passionate words why they need to look at your synopsis. Make them curious. And then if they've read their synopsis, they read their synopsis, they read your letter. That's your introduction. If it's an agent, he'll get back to you and probably he'll say, okay, I like to look at that. Most publishing houses would like to have, depends. Some want 20 pages, some want the first chapter, some don't want anything. Some will write back to you and say, okay, please send us the manuscript. Don't send it to them unless they say, please send it, because serious publishing houses don't just expect to be bombarded. Nobody has the time for that. So, and try to get in touch with an editor or a literary agent and make personal connections through letters, through, if you're fortunate to get the email of a literary agent, great, or an editor, great. And then submit that 1-page thing that will make that person want to read the first 20 pages. And if those 20 pages are carved out well, they will say, please send me the whole manuscript. And then you're on your way. And if the manuscript then gets denied, you're not sending it to one publishing house, send it to 100. So, if they can, so I said, and don't send it to Indian publishers alone. I say, murder the Indian publishers, send it to South Africa, send it to America, send it to Britain, send it to Sri Lanka, wherever. The world is your house. In fact, I personally believe that publishers will close down in the next 20 years because the digital world is taking over. And I would suggest place your stories online with a copyright letter, with that copyright mark your pages, and get feedback from the world community, not from your immediate neighbors. I was grateful for all the comments that I got from Germany, Austria, from France, and people who were reading my material encouraged me to go in that direction. Some even wrote to me privately saying, I was not so convinced about that. So that helps you to reflect. And then that's a process you start. Don't set a time frame. Within 3 years I'll get published. No. Start it. See where it takes you. Go, be relaxed. And I said, if you can get a teacher's job, it's one of the best jobs in the country here. Be a nurse, be a doctor, be everything else. Earn your livelihood, be a housewife. But follow your heart and write your story, write your text.
Yeah, another sort of, what I forgot to say earlier as well, another good piece of advice I got a while ago is to, when you think you finished, leave it for 4 weeks, 5 weeks. It seems painful, it seems like a long time, just to then come back to it and read it, and then you have a clearer way of judging it. It's very hard to judge something you've just written. I mean, every day I write something and I think, wow, that's brilliant, then I read it the next morning and think that's absolutely awful, and it goes in the bin. So it's, so that 5 months gives you something. You may look back and say, wow, how did I think of that? Or what is that rubbish? And it just gives you a better idea. And while you're doing that, as I said, you get the option then to write short stories, which you may try and pitch to a magazine. Because it's probably easier to get a short story published initially and go that way. Or even start another book. Because I mean, I've read that tip that if you send out your book to someone else, don't just wait for that. If you're ready and you've got another idea, there's no harm in starting again. And can I ask what sort of thing you're writing? Yeah. Okay, so I mean, even that, I mean, I can, for example, I can give you my email address afterwards, and if you, I mean, I can't read a lot because I've got kids, I barely read my own books, but like just a synopsis and like the first chapter, I'm more than happy to read and give feedback. And I could be wrong, but I'm just saying it's a different perspective to see.
Thank you. So I wanted your opinion on getting an MFA in creative writing.
Excuse me?
An MFA degree.
Yeah.
In creative writing.
Yeah.
So I was looking at some degrees in creative writing for fiction and literature. Yeah. So what is your opinion on that, and do you think it will actually help in writing / getting published?
Okay. My experience with that at that stage where you are where you're actually writing, you're in the process of writing, I was very fortunate to attend a workshop which lasted a month in Philippines. That was way back in 1979. We had a novelist every day. It was a national writers workshop, but there were people from Vietnam, from Indonesia, from Japan, and so in a sense I learned a lot from that kind of national writers workshop. It sensitized me because we were about 25 authors. One was writing crime story, the other one was writing science fiction, and the third one was writing romantic stories, and the other one was writing about a journey into his mother's womb, back into every kind of crazy idea. And every day people read the text and we listened to it, and we all got copies of it, and we polished it and all that. At the same time learning, so on the one hand becoming sensitive to writing, on the other hand, who are the agencies dealing with books? Who are the literary? Today you can go onto the website and look who are the top literary agents of India, who are the top publishing houses of India, or Britain, or Africa, whatever. And then establish contact, try to contact them, and try to contact with small things, what you call piercing diamond pieces. And they'll get back to you. You have to, and believe in yourself, and that's the main thing. Because the trouble with young authors is, if you get a no and you take it for a no, and then you get another no, and then you get disappointed, then you stop writing and say, oh, I don't. But sometimes it helps to be honest with your talent. You may not be that talented in that, what you think. Just because you won a short story in Kerala doesn't mean that you're now eligible for the world market. But pursue yourself, find out, and once you have something ready, then I'm sure there's a lot of help coming, like him just saying, offering to read your first text. In my case, I asked my neighbors, I asked my old schoolmates, I asked my German teachers. I wanted to impress them with how good my German was, and they wrote back. But they wrote back not because my text was great, but they had a relationship with me as a person. So people write, and I am a person who never forgets a friend. I have all my friends from all my life. They are all in my I don't go on Facebook a lot, but I'm connected with email with most of them. Today I called one guy in Chennai and he said, when are you coming? What can I do for you? So, connect yourself with the rest of the world, and then doors will open. I'm open. I think.
I'd just add, from what I know about doing a course, I would have quite liked to, because just for the fun of it. But you also, I don't know, where were you planning to, in India itself?
No,
or?
It's in the US.
Okay, right, yeah. So I think, one advantage is you get a great exposure to people in the industry. So you will be having workshops, as you're saying, with agents and publishers, so you can stand out there and then. But it's also another thing where they give you tips of what to put in your cover letter. It's quite handy to have that, so because they get a lot of things written by people who have no experience of writing. On these writers' forums I went on to before I got published, there was a guy who was a really good writer, so I looked into it, and he'd done one of these courses, and he'd come first, and he'd got a first-class degree in it and everything. That was about 8 years ago, and he's still unpublished, so it doesn't always work, but he's certainly skilled in what he does.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's actually quite a tricky one, because there's a big divide between people who say that the English novels are more famous, but then people who can speak all the languages say some of the other language novels are better, but they haven't been translated, so whether they've got world appeal, we're not so sure. But personally, I absolutely love Sri Lankan literature. It's a very diverse culture. We've had a lot of problems in the country. As far as I'm concerned, a bit too much of it is centered on the war, and it's time, I feel, to break away from that. So I myself promised not to write about the war, but then my second book I wrote about the war. But it's just a trap we fall into. But I think it appeals a lot. I know a lot of publishers in India particularly after I've been published, have asked me do I know anyone else who writes, because they want Sri Lankan literature. Because it's a different country, different world, but very similar and appeals to an Indian audience. So someone I introduced to my agent recently has just got a 4-book deal from HarperCollins for sort of science fiction based in Asia, which is more rare. So it's a market they want to crack. Everyone is looking for sort of a Sri Lankan Harry Potter or an Indian Harry Potter or something like that. So there are opportunities, and some of the books in Sri Lanka have done very well. In English. So I'm afraid I can't, because I'm not actually Sri Lankan, so I don't. My Sinhalese isn't good, and I can't read it. So, but people say that the local talent's very good. It just hasn't been. So Michael Ondaatje, actually almost nothing to do. He lives in Canada, so we don't really meet him at all. But he is an inspiration to everyone, because he won the Booker Prize. But him and there's other prize winners, Shehan Karantilaka for Chinaman, which started off by winning the ST Prize and I think $50,000 there and a few other things. That was in 2007, I think, and he hasn't been able to publish another book yet because he set his standards so high. I set my standards lower, so it was easier to sort of. So he's trying to better what he wrote. Naimi Munereira has won a Commonwealth Prize. So, but there still is the belief that it should be better, though, because if compared to Indian writers who win a lot more prizes and a lot more prominent, there aren't that many prominent Sri Lankan writers. So everyone's suggesting we all try and set up bar higher. But I highly recommend a lot of Sri Lankan books, and I think they're good examples of seeing. Sri Lanka as a country, if you haven't been, it's a small island with so much diversity within the island. So in terms of when I write about Sri Lanka, I find it very easy because there's some very distinct characters. So the characterization makes it easier. There's a lot of underground conflict, which sort of comes out to the fore when you start writing. But for a lot of Sri Lankan writers, they will look to get published in India. So the publishing scene there is pretty small. The one publisher there who's done quite well can't actually afford to pay advances or promotions or anything. So people with greater ambitions look towards here.
What I would like to recommend to you once again is not to hang too much on publishing houses alone, because today, if you have something which is pretty good or which you feel quite happy about, you can go online, publish it online, before you give it to a publisher even. Because publishing online doesn't mean that you have limited your choices. You can publish something online. There are several platforms which help you with that for a very minimum charge. In Switzerland, where I live, I can get a book published for $100 online. It's $100 in Switzerland is for 10 coffee. It's not more than that. So you can get that published, and then people begin to read it, and then you have it. And if sufficient number of friends want to have a printed copy, those publishing house platforms are designed in such a way that you can design your own cover, and you can even print it and say, okay, I have 1,000 friends, or I have 500 friends who want to read it. I have a good Facebook or this kind of community who want to read it. Print it out, because in Kerala printing is not that expensive, and then you have that already, and then give it to an agent, or even today, a lot of publishing houses are looking at what is published on the internet to take that, because when they see, oh, this book has so many clicks and so many people are reading it and there's so much comment on it, then the publishing houses become curious and they approach you. You don't go fishing for them, they come fishing for you. So that's also possible.
You were going to ask? Yeah. But I think I know what you're going to ask, and I'll be honest, like my literary agent, if you say I've been published online, will say, okay, I don't want to see that, send me your next book. But that depends on the person.
I have a question. So I'm pretty impatient myself. So is it better to just go with the self-publishing option then? Is there any big changes when you go for the traditional one?
About self-publishing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my personal view is that the only problem with self-publishing, I think, is that because it is so easy that, like, nowadays the technology is there, is that maybe you might not find, I think for someone like Mathew, we discussed how he writes, he's very diligent, he may write one paragraph a day over 5 hours or something, so he's self-editing himself. But for someone like me, who I write very fast, so the temptation would be the second I finish, if I was self-publishing, to put it on board when I'm not making it as good as it could be. Whereas to get a publisher, I have to work much harder to get it through. And so, and to be honest, when I read, I often will be scared of a self-published book because I don't know if it's been through that.
It's polished enough.
Yeah.
Right?
But as Mathew was saying, after a while, if you've got such a big audience and people are writing huge reviews, then that's a different matter. But I was talking about the Sri Lankan author who won the DSC prize. He went, I think, a few years without finding a publisher. He self-published, and then he got picked up by a random house here. And then from there, he won these awards and got published around the world. So it's definitely an option. But again, he was similar to Mathew. I think he really pushed himself and made sure it was as good as it could be.
I'm kind of in a similar situation right now. So I have like a couple of books published, and I'm working on my third one right now. And right now there are publishers who are coming back to me who are interested in taking it. But the thing is, I already kind of have a system in place. So I'm a bit iffy on if I should shift into traditional publishing. Any advice?
Again, my personal choice would go through traditional publishers if they're interested.
They're not big ones like yours or anything. They're pretty much smaller based ones in Delhi and stuff like that.
That's fine. I mean, that's fine. It would depend how much they would give you, not in terms of money, but in terms of feedback.
How better they can make the books, right?
Yeah. Then editorial help, pushing you along, making you work harder, and being honest with you, and then as it comes out, I mean, through my if I would self-publish, I don't know, I wouldn't have any reviews in the papers. So whereas I've got a lot of reviews in Indian papers, I'm not based here, but through the publishers have got those. I wouldn't have been able to get those on my own.
So it does make the job a lot easier, if nothing else.
It does. I mean, but it doesn't. Surprisingly, I didn't realize this before I got published. But if you get a traditional publisher, even if it's a big name anywhere in the world, it doesn't automatically mean your books will be in bookshops, because now they say I'm my name up against my first book up against Jeffrey Archer, for example. Someone who doesn't know will go into bookshops. So they will stock, even bookshops here would rather stock famous foreign authors rather than stock you.
And give new people a chance.
Yeah,
So,
but they're not interested in giving you a chance. It's more about them making money, right? So
in that case, you'll already have to be pretty famous to get your
well,
books
it depends. But then you start getting good reviews,
okay.
and then the publisher can use those reviews to go to the bookshop and say, "Look at this," and then it can get in.
Then they promote it.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
thanks.
then, and then actually it goes back to my third book is short stories, but they're linked. And connections of short stories are traditionally very, very hard to sell internationally. And the feedback I've got from international publishers is unless you're very famous already in our market.
Yeah, they don't really give a lot of chance to new writers.
No, it's for short stories, because their reasoning is because a short story collection
There's not a market for it.
they can't get reviews in England. Okay, for example, in England they can't get it reviewed unless you're famous already. They can get a novel reviewed if you're a new writer and recommended, but for some reason they can't get short story collections reviewed. And if they can't get them reviewed, the bookshops won't stock them. So it's a cycle. So there are benefits, but as Mathew was saying, if you're on self-publishing, then you've got your own networks and you've got your own. The guy I talked about who's just got a 4-book deal, he was self-publishing and selling quite a lot. I mean, there's a lot of advantages. If you're on Kindle, for example, you can set your own price. You can do one day, I'll give it free to get a market. You can next day 50 cents, next day 99 cents. Whereas my books are very expensive on Kindle, and I've got no say in that. And that's the publisher controlling it, because they would probably want to push the print sales. Whereas I'm interested in people buying in other countries, but it's overpriced in my view, but nothing I can do about it. Whereas you would have more
So
control.
you'll have lesser control on like how you sell
Yeah.
and things like
Yeah.
that as well. Thanks.
No, thanks so.
If I may add one thing, by putting something online, you're not getting into a marriage. You can always withdraw. You see, you don't have to keep it there. You get your initial feedbacks, and you see how your work is being received. Then you take it out, work on it again maybe, and if you have got good feedbacks, then you know, okay, I've got enough confidence now to approach a big publisher, and you approach an agent, and then the publisher has another problem. Publisher with a young starting person, unknown person, you say, Renuka is unknown in the world. Who is this Renuka? So they are cautious with the number of copies they'll print, and then it has to move in the shops. So there is a big effort on their part to market it, how to get it advertised. You see, in Switzerland where I live, if I enter a bookshop this size, I have literature from Argentina, from Siberia, from Japan, from all over. If I look for literature from Kerala there, I'd be lost. There probably is nothing. There is nothing there. So there's usually Arundhati Roy maybe once. The other names are not known. What you call White Tiger came out, and a couple of other books. Sukesh Mehta, A Suitable Boy, those things. But again, in the world market, they are small names. It's like people in Kerala believe their movies are the greatest. But when you go on the international stage, you say, oh, they are not movies. They are still dramas, still theatre shot on film. So in order to go that far, you have to have a good subject and a good hand. I think in any art, later on in some stage, I would recognize his book from his writing. Oh, that is his style. That is his way of storytelling. And if you look at the great authors of our times, they all have their mark. They have their own signature and soul to it. And that takes you. Because you're so still at the beginning and at the young stage, you have the whole of life before you. So there is not one single path to publishing. There are so many ways. And you can start, especially for poets, I would say, start with publishing on poetry forums, networks. Start publishing your things on novels on a trial basis, and then take it out when you think you're ready to give it to a thing. Because I believe in reviews. When I go into a bookshop, I have read 2 or 3 weeks ago in our best literary criticism, that is a book that you have to read. And I read about it, and I read about the language, and I read a little text which compels me to read. Just recently, some South African girl has written a book about going blind and her experiences of going blind. She knows she's going to become blind, and every day she has the first thing. The first page is, I don't see anything, so blank. And then I see a little bit, and then it develops, and till the point where she goes blind, totally blind, sees nothing, and the book finishes there. And I read about this review, and I said, I must have this book, because I want to have that experience of going blind. That's somebody's gift to me. So this is how a lot of people in Europe, they have all the books in the world at their disposal. Plus with the internet, you have millions and millions of books. And picking that book and reading it and getting a good review, and that review takes you. Arundhati Roy, for example, has a name, and that way her second book gets read because she's got a name. So if you don't reach that stage, it's a long way up. So a publisher might publish you one time, two time, and then if his books don't move, he'll say, I've got other authors. That is the fact.
What kind of marketing would an author realistically do? Because at different stages of the publishing journey. Because particularly traditional publishers seem to rely a lot on the authors these days with so many books coming into the market. So they say, we can do this much, maybe we can give you a first print run of 2,000 copies or whatever. But you've got to do all the marketing. I'm sorry, you have to do...
I don't think you need that. What
can be realistic?
You're absolutely right, because I didn't know that when I first got, I sent off a book and I got published. I did the editing and it was finished, chose the cover, and I thought, okay, now I relax. But actually, that's when the hard work starts, because the writing is what I enjoyed, and then I found after that the amount of publicity you have to do yourself. For example, I left Facebook because everyone was showing off about things too much, and then when I got published, I had to come back and start showing off. It looks like I was showing off, but you have to market it and you have to really sell yourself. And in any forum you can, if anyone asks to interview you, even at 1 o'clock in the morning, you get up and do it. And you do have to push it, and especially at the beginning. I'm sure Arundhati Roy doesn't have to do that sort of thing, but even she goes, she interviewed all the time. So it's an incredible amount of work, and I guess because of social media, a lot of it you can do yourself. And actually, when you talk about self-publishing, because of these forums I've been on, a lot of the writers didn't get publishing contracts, so have self-published, and I see them online, and they are experts at marketing. They really build up. They suddenly have 20,000 followers on Twitter. And I think between them they sort of share resources and they promote each other and move on. If you're talking about self-publishing, I think I didn't mention earlier things like if you're in genre fiction, like science fiction or something like that, you've got your own sort of network of writers who help each other and push each other along and read each other's work and promote it. But it is an extraordinary amount of work after you get published.
At this moment, self-publishing is only still in its initial stages. I think it'll take 10, 20 years to get little things organized and structured. They'll be pushing. I don't think about marketing strategies at that moment. When I'm writing focused on my book. And I think once a publisher takes you on, they have their own marketing strategy. They invite you to discussion. Maybe have radio shows. You may be appearing in all kind of things. In my case, I just wrote this. I have so many requests for interviews. I have given a talk for about 1 hour on radio, combining old Malayalam songs and interview with me. So people get to hear about, but that depends more. I didn't think about that while I was writing. But that's my public pushing me to do that kind of thing, to get known. So, and I think good publishing houses, they take your book to the Frankfurt Book Fair, to the London Book Fair, take you along, and then present you to papers. So they have their own strategies.
One thing I noticed is a big difference between my first book and my third. So the publisher by my third book, different publishers, but did a lot more. My first book, you're unknown, they're taking a small chance, they don't really care that much. Also, my first book came out at the same time as Tendulkar's autobiography. So we had all these plans, and then suddenly, hey, where's everyone gone? It's just like, so it depends. Obviously, I know I'm not the most important person, and it depends what you're dealing with. And that's also how you choose a publisher. For my third book, I went with Pan Macmillan in India because they publish far fewer books within India. So I think 1 or 2 a month, so I knew that I would get more help on that. So I didn't have to do nearly as much as I did with my first book.
The whole industry, through digitalization, is becoming more and more professional. So, for example, Kerala, there were 1 publishing house, 2 publishing houses and all. Slowly competition comes in. World authors are coming in, people who have from left Kerala and living abroad and coming back to publishing here. There's a lot more things going on. So I think in the next few years, there will be literary agents here, which was never the case before. And I think one of the things that you can do right now is, now you've seen this festival, this literary festival. I've heard Jaipur is one of the biggest in the world. It's teeming with people. So you have to take your chance, go there, bump into people, drop your purse in front of a literary agent and say, oh, thank you for picking it up, and say, I don't know, be a crook if you want to be, but I wouldn't do that. But if I believe in something, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'd even jab a knife into it.
I mean, there's actually a story like that. An author I know, Prajwal, he went to, I think it was London some book fair in Europe, and at the time the Icelandic volcano erupted and no one could fly, so it got cancelled. But he was on his way there, and the train was empty apart from one person, and he got talking to them, and it turned out to be a literary agent. And suddenly he showed her just one short story, and that's all he'd written. She really liked it and said, write a book and I'll do my best, and then it got published. So it does happen, but equally they could read it and hate it and hide from you.
No, but just it gives you the opportunity to widen your experience, widen your contacts, because personally, I must say, contacts are very important. Very, very few people talk about it. It's like getting a job in the government. You have the connections. Sadly, the world in publishing is not unsimilar. It's very similar. You establish contacts. You find your way. Then you bump into the right people. You bump into the wrong people. But one day you get there because you have a product which is good. So, and you have to believe in that. That's it.
And actually, I mean, what I've also been told, but a lot of what I'm saying is also based on the research I did before I got published. But the other thing is, because you're expected to market yourself quite a lot now, these personal contacts are good, because if an agent or a publisher likes you and thinks you're a marketable person, in terms of you're quite personable or whatever, that also helps them decide that, A, they want to work. They also don't want to work with people they don't like. So they feel like they can have a good relationship with you, and they think that you can market yourself. That also helps. So meeting people at these sort of things definitely helps.
Done. Before the submissions are made to the literary agent or publisher directly, you have your own agent.
I generally do that. And now my agent has people who do that for me. But before I went to them, I would do that anyway. I mentioned that there's things online where you can either get it done for free when you edit other people, or you go to a professional and you pay a certain fee, which I think is worth doing. I mean, it's a cost, but it's like an education, and it's worth getting that feedback. And maybe the feedback might come back saying this is great, and then you have more confidence sort of pushing yourself forward. If they say this doesn't work, that doesn't work, you either think, you may disagree with them or you may agree with them, but at least it gives you, because they're also, with these literary consultancies, they're employing people who are also working for publishers or for agents, so they're the kind of people you're reaching out to. So even you may, your book may be good enough anyway, but they can come back and say, this is what an agent looks looking for now. And then that's a lot of, sorry, I didn't mention this before, but agents and consultants and things like that will also tell you this is the market, this is the kind of thing publishers are really looking for now. Because actually my next book I'm trying, because I've got young kids, I'm trying to write a children's book. And then I reached out to someone, I paid I think £100 to get my synopsis and first chapter read, because I had no idea if I was writing the right way. And I got the feedback which said, you're writing too adult, so you need to, so that's a good early, I got that feedback very early, and then I could sort of adapt the way I was writing and try again. So I definitely think it's worth it. I hate giving my work to friends or family, so I just find it too awkward. Like, you see them and you don't tell me, but when it's someone you don't know, they're always positive. They'll give you positive feedback, but tell you the areas you should focus on.
I think there are two stages of editing. I mean, a person who's writing for the first time probably gives it to somebody else, maybe somebody who knows English better than you, Malayalam better than you, Tamil better than you, and you get it edited first from him, and then you send it to a publishing house. Once a publishing house like HarperCollins or Penguin or Random House pick it up, They have an editor. That editor is going to be your partner in the publishing process. That editor will have very... I listened to a lady yesterday, Manisa, whatever her name was. Yes. Yeah. You see, they have their own policies. They know they are professionals, and they will chisel out your work. They'll polish it. They may even ask you to remove a certain passage because it says, oh, that's too touchy an issue and so on, where you can, of course, say, I want to stick with my guns, and then she can still reject you. That's a risk. But if you work with her hand in hand, then the book actually becomes a joint product of your imagination and her craftsmanship, her or his craftsmanship. Ideally, good editors help you bring the best of your manuscript. And somebody may correct you grammatically and all that, but an editor who looks at that book in its entirety, reads it one time, reads it a second time, and says, chapter 1 and chapter 3 are too similar, they are repeating. Let's get rid of one. Things like that can happen. So you have to be open to that process, because finally it is, even if it's your book, it is you and that publishing house who are going into a marriage, and it is your child together.
Absolutely. And I mean, also just another set of eyes can point something out. Like, you may have heard the phrase, kill your darlings. So there's a passage which you think is just amazing and it's your favorite part, but an editor can say, I like that, the way that's written, but it's got it's just not taking the story forward. Maybe keep that for another book, but it's not here. And I'm always receptive to that, and I can see it and, think, yeah, take that out, and it tends to work, and then you read it back and you see where it's improved. And actually I do then take that, and I have used parts like that for other books. So nothing I write I ever feel is wasted, because it can come back somewhere else. Like, actually, it's a bit of a cheat, but my second book, which is Mathew, with the editor, before it got to her, my agent said, again, it needs to be a bit longer. So I took a couple of scenes from a couple of short stories.
What about the synopsis of it? What should the technical synopsis?
Because publishers would like to know what you're writing about.
There's always a fear that they might just leak it out to somebody else, right?
No, I mean, if a book is, I don't know. There is always the risk of your story being stolen. That is always there. But good publishing houses don't do that. They don't copy that kind of thing. Because you have a copyright symbol at the end of your pages. They wouldn't do that. But the novel is not the synopsis, because they can steal an idea, but they can't steal your language. They can't steal your emotion. They can't steal the characters. It's very difficult. From a synopsis, if you say, I am writing about the experiences of a barber in a little shop in a village, and how he gets to become gradually a great lover, or a great fanatic, or whatever, that is your synopsis. From that, they cannot reconstruct your novel. They can maybe take that little idea. They can just steal that idea, but they can't. The novel begins with sentences, with words, with melody. If you are into writing and you read carefully, every sentence has a certain, good literature has a certain flow and a certain rhythm and certain character. It evokes certain smells. It evokes a picture of the place where you are. You can place your whole story in a lift. I can write and say, I have a novel about a man who is servicing a lift. He goes up and down. That's the short story. And something happens to him which is unexpected. But how you write it, how you tell the story, that can't be stolen.
So what do you write the synopsis?
My synopsis? Well, my synopsis for my book is, it is a very simple thing. As a child, I grew up in a little village surrounded by mountains. That was my world. And now I live in Switzerland, and the whole world and the whole universe is my world. So how I moved from having a small world and becoming a part of a larger world, that is my story.
Yeah, but synopses are I find them impossible to write. They're really hard to, because you have to give everything away, but,
I'm sorry, we are forced to end the session because of the time limit.
Sure. Yes. Anyway, I'll be outside if you've got any questions. I might have to run to the toilet first, but then I'm...
So we have come to the end of this session. I thank the dignitaries for their valuable words and time. Now, as a token of our respect and love, we would like to present you a memento, and I invite Satish Alek sir to present the memento, and I request Chhimmi Tendef-la and Mathew Kuzhuppallil to receive the same. Thank you. The session ends here.